8 things that make a narcissist suffer more than no contact. For countless individuals who have bravely navigated the bewildering and often brutal landscape of narcissistic abuse, a central question frequently arises: how do I make them understand the pain they've caused? Or perhaps more powerfully, how do I truly escape, and what truly impacts them? The answer often points to the widely advocated strategy of no contact, a definitive, absolute severing of all ties. And indeed, no contact is a profoundly powerful and essential tool for your healing, as it strips the narcissist of their vital supply and forces them to confront a terrifying absence. For the narcissist, the sudden and permanent loss of a primary source of supply is a devastating blow, a profound narcissistic injury that often triggers intense rage and desperate hoovering attempts. But what if I told you that beneath the surface of their desperate reactions to no contact, there are even deeper, more intrinsic forms of suffering that narcissists endure? What if the true karma they face isn't solely the consequence of your absence, but the inescapable, insidious reality of their own disordered minds? What if their suffering is less about what you do to them, and more about what they are to themselves? The truth is, while no contact is a crucial external boundary that protects you, it simultaneously strips away the narcissist's coping mechanisms, forcing them to confront terrifying internal realities they spend their entire lives desperately avoiding. These are the aspects of their own pathology that inflict a relentless, agonizing form of suffering, a kind of internal karma that predates your departure and will continue long after, amplified and exposed by your absence. These are the things that, from a psychological perspective, make a narcissist suffer even more than the initial shock of no contact, because they are the inescapable truths of their own empty existence. In this video, we are going to courageously delve into 8 profound psychological realities that make a narcissist suffer more than the simple act of no contact. These are the intrinsic pains that live within them, magnified when they can no longer project or escape them by exploiting others. Understanding these deeper forms of suffering is not about wishing them ill, but about gaining profound clarity for your own healing journey. It helps you see their desperate maneuvers for what they truly are, validates your instincts, and solidifies your resolve, knowing that their core suffering is a self-inflicted prison they can never truly escape, no matter how much they try to drag others into it. When we explore the concept of a narcissist's suffering, especially when claiming it can be more than no contact, it's critical to understand this from a purely psychological and humanistic perspective, rather than a punitive or vengeful one. No contact is indeed a devastating blow to a narcissist because it directly cuts off their primary source of narcissistic supply, the attention, admiration, control, and emotional reactions they desperately need to regulate their fragile ego. This loss triggers intense narcissistic injury, leading to rage, desperate hoovering, and a sense of profound powerlessness. However, beyond this immediate reaction, there are deeper, more insidious forms of suffering that are inherent to the very nature of narcissistic personality disorder. These are internal realities that the narcissist carries with them always, and which they desperately try to escape, project, or mask through their interactions with others. When no contact is successfully implemented, or when their other manipulative strategies fail, these intrinsic sufferings become amplified, exposed, and unavoidable. They are the inevitable karma of a life lived without genuine self, empathy, or true connection. Here are 8 profound psychological realities that make a narcissist suffer more than simply being cut off. The inescapable, chronic emptiness and void within. Perhaps the most fundamental and enduring form of suffering a narcissist experiences, far deeper than the temporary pain of no contact, is the inescapable, chronic emptiness and profound void that resides at the core of their being. Unlike healthy individuals who possess a stable, authentic self and internal resources for contentment, the narcissist's identity is a hollow construct, a meticulously crafted facade built on external validation. When that external validation, that narcissistic supply, is not flowing in abundance, they are left with a terrifying pervasive vacuum. Psychologically, this chronic emptiness is the bedrock of their disorder. They lack genuine self-worth, a true sense of identity, or an inner world rich with meaning and purpose. This profound internal desolation leads to an unbearable ennui, a constant yearning for external stimulation to fill the void. While no contact deprives them of a specific source of supply, the emptiness itself is an internal condition they cannot escape, regardless of who is in their life. Your absence doesn't create this void. It merely prevents them from using you to distract themselves from it. When they are deprived of supply, especially consistent supply, the reality of this profound, existential emptiness becomes horrifyingly apparent to them, even if they never consciously acknowledge it. They are perpetually chasing something that can never truly fill them, leaving them in a constant state of dissatisfaction and an unacknowledged fear of non-existence. This internal desolation is their constant and most brutal self-inflicted karma. 2. The pervasive, unacknowledged shame. Deep beneath the narcissist's grandiose facade lies a profound and pervasive dark secret, a debilitating, unacknowledged shame and a crushing sense of inadequacy. This is arguably the most agonizing and persistent form of suffering for a narcissist, far more profound than the immediate sting of no contact. They spend their entire lives desperately running from this core shame, projecting it onto others, and meticulously constructing an elaborate false self to conceal it. Psychologically, this shame stems from early childhood experiences of invalidation, neglect, or abuse, leading to a fragmented sense of self and an unbearable feeling of being fundamentally flawed. Their grandiosity is a brittle defense mechanism against this deep-seated feeling of worthlessness. When no contact is implemented, or when any source of supply is removed, the narcissist loses a primary means of externalizing and projecting this shame onto their victim. They are then left alone with the terrifying possibility of confronting their own internal inadequacy. While they will immediately project this shame onto you, blaming you, smearing you, the underlying internal reservoir of shame remains, perpetually threatening to overwhelm them. Their rage and desperate attempts to regain control are often fueled by this unbearable shame. They are relentlessly tormented by an internal critic they cannot silence, an unacknowledged feeling that they are not enough. This pervasive, unacknowledged shame is an inescapable and brutal internal prison, far more debilitating than the loss of any single individual, and one that your absence forces them to confront on a deeper, more primal level. The inability to form genuine connections, profound, inescapable loneliness. Despite often appearing charismatic and surrounded by admirers, a deeply profound and agonizing form of suffering for a narcissist, far exceeding the pain of no contact from one individual, is their inherent, pathological inability to form genuine reciprocal emotional connections, leading to an inescapable and profound loneliness. They are condemned to a life of superficial relationships, transactional interactions, and ultimately, a chilling emotional isolation. Psychologically, narcissists lack the capacity for true empathy, vulnerability, and mutual respect, which are the cornerstones of authentic connection. They view others as mere extensions of themselves, existing solely to provide supply. While they may have many flying monkeys or acquaintances, they lack true friends, confidantes, or a partner who sees and loves them for who they truly are. This is because they can never reveal their authentic self, and they cannot genuinely connect with others. No contact doesn't create this loneliness. It merely exposes and amplifies the profound existential isolation they have created for themselves through their relational patterns. When you go no contact, you leave them to grapple with the consequences of their own superficiality. They are forced to cycle through new sources of supply, each one inevitably leading to the same emptiness once the initial love bombing wears off. This pervasive, incurable loneliness, a consequence of their own pathology, is a far deeper and more enduring suffering than the loss of any single relationship, a brutal internal reality they can never escape. 4. The destructive, unregulated narcissistic rage. A terrifying and often self-destructive form of suffering that plagues a narcissist, intensified by the absence of external targets, is their unregulated, all-consuming narcissistic rage. This is not simply anger. It is an explosive, disproportionate fury, that erupts when their fragile ego is threatened, when they feel criticized, or when their pervasive sense of entitlement is challenged. Psychologically, this rage stems from the profound internal pain and shame mentioned earlier. When their grandiose facade is even slightly breached, it triggers an unbearable internal agony, which they immediately convert into outward aggression. While they typically project this rage onto their victims, no contact removes you as a primary target. This forces the narcissist to either turn the rage inward, leading to chronic anxiety, self-destructive behaviors, or even physical illness, or to direct it onto increasingly less suitable targets, further damaging their remaining relationships and public image. The suffering here is that they are enslaved by their own volatile emotions. They are constantly in a state of internal turmoil, bubbling with resentment and fury they cannot healthily process or contain. This unchecked rage ultimately poisons their own lives, burns bridges, alienates potential sources of supply, and can lead to impulsive, self-sabotaging actions that result in severe legal, professional, or social consequence. This chronic, destructive fury is a form of self-inflicted torture, a brutal internal landscape they are perpetually trapped within, magnified when they cannot effectively offload it onto you. 5. The terror of exposure and annihilation of the false self. Perhaps the deepest and most terrifying form of suffering for a narcissist, one that eclipses the pain of no contact, is their primal, existential terror of exposure and the annihilation of their meticulously constructed false self. Their entire life is a desperate, exhausting performance designed to hide their inner emptiness and profound inadequacy. The thought of being seen for who they truly are, a deeply insecure, flawed, and empty individual, is an unbearable prospect that triggers an intense, unacknowledged fear. Psychologically, the false self is their primary defense mechanism, a grandiose persona built to protect them from their unacknowledged core shame. When no contact is implemented, they lose a primary audience for this performance. They can no longer manipulate you into validating their false self or using you to regulate their internal state. This forces them to confront the terrifying possibility that their carefully constructed facade might crumble, exposing the terrifying void beneath. While they will desperately seek new supply to rebuild their external validation, the underlying terror of exposure remains a constant, gnawing presence. They are always vigilant, always scanning for threats, always anticipating discovery. This pervasive paranoia and the constant fear of their true self being revealed is an emotionally exhausting and profoundly brutal existence. They are prisoners of their own deception, unable to truly relax or be authentic, always living under the shadow of potential collapse. This relentless internal terror is a suffering far deeper than simply losing a source of supply. It is the constant threat of their psychological non-existence. 6. The relentless, unsatisfying chase for supply. A profound and perpetually unfulfilling form of suffering for a narcissist, made more acute by effective no contact, is their relentless, insatiable, and ultimately unsatisfying chase for narcissistic supply. They are pathologically addicted to external validation, attention, and control, but no amount of supply is ever truly enough to fill the void within. Psychologically, this relentless pursuit stems from their fundamental inability to generate self-worth internally. They are like a bottomless pit, constantly needing to be filled, yet never truly satisfied. When no contact cuts off a specific source, it doesn't cure their addiction. It mere forces them to frantically search for new supply, often with increased desperation and decreased effectiveness. The suffering here is this perpetual state of craving and dissatisfaction. They are condemned to an endless cycle of idealizing new sources, devaluing them when they inevitably fail to provide perfect, continuous validation, and then discarding them to seek the next fix. They can never experience genuine contentment or sustained inner peace because their needs are boundless and their gratification fleeting. This constant anxious pursuit, this relentless hamster wheel of external validation, is an exhausting and deeply unfulfilling existence, a brutal form of karma that ensures they are always striving, but never truly arriving at satisfaction. Your effective no contact makes this hunger more acute and more difficult to satiate. 7. The self-sabotaging cycle of idealization, devaluation, discard. While victims suffer immensely from the narcissist's idealization, devaluation, discard cycle, a brutal form of suffering for the narcissist themselves is their pathological compulsion to repeat this self-sabotaging cycle in every significant relationship they enter. This ensures that they will always destroy any semblance of genuine connection, leaving them in perpetual isolation and never knowing true intimacy. Psychologically, this cycle is an inherent manifestation of their attachment pathology and their inability to sustain genuine relationships. They idealize initially, projecting their fantasies onto a new source. When reality inevitably sets in, and the new source, like all humans, fails to be a perfect, constant reflection of their grandiosity, the devaluation begins, leading to discard. The suffering for the narcissist, though often unacknowledged, is that they are condemned to repeat this destructive pattern endlessly. They will always push away genuine connection, always destroy what they claim to desire, and always end up alone, perpetually cycling through superficial bonds. No contact prevents you from re-entering this cycle, but it doesn't break the narcissist's compulsion to repeat it with others. This ensures a life of relational chaos, emotional instability, and a deepening isolation that becomes more pronounced with age, as former sources of supply become wise and move on. This self-destructive pattern, which systematically destroys their own chances at genuine happiness, is a profound and inescapable form of suffering that is far more debilitating than the loss of any single relationship. 8. The profound lack of meaning and purpose in life. Finally, perhaps the most existentially devastating and subtle form of suffering that plagues a narcissist, far beyond the impact of no contact, is their profound and chronic lack of genuine meaning and purpose in their life, despite any outward achievements, wealth, or apparent success. Psychologically, true meaning and purpose are often derived from genuine connection, altruism, contribution to something larger than oneself, vulnerability, and a capacity for self-reflection and growth. The narcissist, devoid of genuine empathy, perpetually self-focused, and obsessed with external validation, cannot access these deeper sources of fulfillment. Their life becomes a relentless, hollow pursuit of superficial gains, status, power, possessions, fleeting admiration, none of which can truly fill the spiritual and emotional void within them. When no contact removes your role as a primary source, it strips away one of their main mechanisms for deriving false meaning, e.g., controlling you, maintaining an image for you. This exacerbates their underlying existential emptiness. As they age, and their external sources of supply diminish or become harder to acquire, this profound lack of meaning becomes even more pronounced and inescapable. They are left with a legacy of broken relationships, superficial achievements, and a pervasive sense that their life, for all its outward show, lacks any profound significance or authentic joy. This lack of meaning is a brutal, quiet karma, a self-inflicted sentence to a life lived without true contentment, enduring peace, or the deep satisfaction that comes from genuine human connection and contribution. It is the ultimate, inescapable tragedy of their disorder. While no contact is an absolutely essential and profoundly effective strategy for your healing and liberation, it's crucial to understand that the narcissist's deepest, most enduring suffering isn't something you inflict upon them. Rather, it is the inescapable, inherent reality of their own disordered minds. The chronic emptiness, the pervasive unacknowledged shame, the profound and inescapable loneliness, the destructive, unregulated rage, the primal terror of exposure, the relentless and unsatisfying chase for supply, their self-sabotaging cycle of relational destruction, and the profound lack of meaning in their lives. These are the intrinsic, agonizing realities that they carry with them always. Your act of going no contact doesn't create these sufferings, it merely strips away their manipulative coping mechanisms, forcing them to confront these painful truths they desperately try to avoid by exploiting others. It denies them the ability to project their internal agony onto you, leaving them alone with the very demons they created. Understanding this profound psychological reality is not about wishing them ill but about gaining invaluable clarity for your own healing journey. It helps you recognize that their desperate reactions are not a sign of true love or genuine remorse, but a frantic attempt to regain control and escape their own internal torment. This knowledge empowers you to solidify your boundaries, free yourself from any lingering guilt, and embrace your own authentic path toward peace, knowing that their suffering is an internal prison they can never truly escape. Thank you for joining us on this vital journey of insight and empowerment. If this video has resonated deeply with you, or if you believe it could bring crucial understanding and a clear path forward to someone you know, please share it widely and with intention. Let's continue to illuminate the path toward healing and authentic connection for everyone. See you in the next video.